Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done and published to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. This is a series of spotlights on remarkable exit planning advisors from across the country. And joining me on this segment is David Lupberger. He's the founder of Contractor Exit Strategy. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Mark. I look forward to it.
David, tell us a little bit about your work and specifically tell us who are the types of clients that you specialize in helping.
I'm a former building contractor, did it for almost 25 years. And as you can see, as I got into my 60s, I began asking myself, what's next? And began to discover that as much of the market, and I would do public presentations, and honestly, half of the room had either white hair or no hair. And I discovered that what I was dealing with was concurrent with their concerns. What's next? Where do I go from here? So I began having conversations with people about what does that next phase of your work look like? And discovered, interestingly enough, that most don't want to quit, but they would love to shift the focus of day-to-day activities and functions. So we began talking about how to do that and a process to do that. So I opened Contractor Exit Strategy to really guide owners through this process of beginning to delegate in a systematic fashion so the company maintains value, they save time, and they all do what they do best.
As business owners, you know, they're great at that day-to-day, as you mentioned, and they're always thinking growth. But when it comes time to exiting or transitioning into the next phase, how much thought did they put into it? Did it kind of catch them by surprise, or have they given it much thought? Do they know where to start?
They really don't. And because this market has been so strong for the last 10 or 12 years, I'll say, are you planning for any kind of transition or exit? And more than that, what I call business continuity. If something happened to you, something happened to a family member, and you couldn't be at work for 4, 6, 8 weeks, what would happen? 90% of these companies would close because the owner carries all those functions. They do all these things. The company management and ongoing functions depend on the owner. So we have some really wonderful conversations of what do you do in the business now? Let's look at a systematic way to begin handing off systematically. It takes time. I'll be perfectly honest. If somebody says, I like what you're saying, I'm going to tell them to truly transition out of day-to-day functions and activities can easily be 3 years, if not longer. So let's think about it now because it's coming and ultimately you will leave your business. All right. Let's do it with a plan. Let's not do it haphazardly and let's plan for it.
Let's unpack that a little bit. You mentioned some of the things people need to be concerned with before they start to exit. What else is there? Do they have any myths or misconceptions about exiting or transitioning from their business? What do you hear out there?
The reality, the interesting part of this is that they would say, I'd like to work less. And then I'll have questions. What would you be doing? And oftentimes the initial reaction is, I'm just going to take time off. I'm going to play golf. Well, guess what? You're not going to play golf more than 3 days a week. All right. If that, and after about 3 months, you're going to be bored. Secondly, I've had people say, you know, I just want to sell my business and go sell sandwiches. Guess what? In 3 months, you'll be bored to tears. You're in this business because it's vital. It's creative. Every day is different. You manage people. You literally affect people's lives, both your clients and your employees. There's a vitality here. Let's maintain that vitality. But like I said, what's the roadmap? Where are you going? And like 80%, there's a survey that was done, 7 or 8 years ago, that said 80% of business owners who actually sold their businesses 1 year later regretted that sale. And the primary purpose was they'd not reassigned that passion and really begun to think, if I'm moving out of doing this, what am I moving into? And this is where I've discovered with the contractors I'm working with, they don't want to retire. All right. They would just love to move away from some of these day-to-day responsibilities and in an appropriate way, hand it off to good employees and go from working 60 hours a week to working maybe 25. And it can be done. But guess what? It's a roadmap. It needs to be planned.
What's it like, thinking of the planning? What's it like to work with you? Kind of give us a big 10,000-foot view of the role of an exit
No,
and transition planning
that
advisor, and how you work together with that client, and what do you coordinate with them?
terrific. So I have a number of different surveys. And, let me understand what you're doing now. So I've got something called an owner centricity quiz. What are all the functions you're involved with? What are you doing now? What do you need to do? Because we can prioritize some of these things. Secondly, then I can introduce what I call a management succession worksheet. And if you're going to delegate these things, who are you delegating them to? In what order? And then lastly, what's the process to delegate those things? And I'm a very strong advocate. Man, I'm going to put it all in writing. If I put it in writing, there's no gray area. So I've got pre-written job descriptions I can share with people. They're all in a Word format, so we can modify this according to that company's functions. So the reality is, I'm saying you can do this. I think I can do it much more quickly working with you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I was curious, David, what inspired you to get into this field and help business owners with their transitions? How did you get started?
It's my own age. Here I hit 60 and I've been consulting with contractors. And suddenly it's like, what do I want to do? We've had our head down with our child, for 30 years, husband and wife. And suddenly you begin to look up as you're an empty nester and you begin to look up and say, what's next? And it's an interesting conversation. What do we want to do? We have the ability to do these things. What do we plan for? What does this look like? And because business can be so all-consuming, it's like, what do we do? What's the process? What's the conversations you have? And you see right now, it's just what we're doing. It's a conversation. All right. What are you thinking about? What's important? And guess what? Things come up during these conversations. And you may discover somebody in a company who says, I'm really interested. 6 months later, they're not. So it's really, let's take this on and let's put together a realistic plan, understanding just like any construction project, it can change and it is subject to change.
Before I ask you my last question,
Yeah.
is there anything that I didn't think to ask you that you feel is important to share with business owners considering transitioning or exiting now or in the near future?
Yeah, I would add one thing. Michael Gerber wrote a book called The E-Myth, and it's helping people systematize to move out of some of these day-to-day operations. He was once asked, what do you see in the most successful companies? And he said they built their company with the end in mind. And I want to have that same conversation. You will not be here forever. You don't need to work 60 hours a week. What can we do to take your unique skill set, empower people in the company to continue doing what you're doing, continue generating an income, but allowing you to strategically to take a role in your company that you enjoy doing, which is why you've been doing this for 20, 30, even 40 years. So basically build with the end in mind.
Sage advice for folks listening, business owners that would like to speak with you, considering selling their business or transitioning now or in the near future. How can they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
So www.contractorexitstrategy.com. Contractorexitstrategy.com. And I mentioned to you when we started, I should have probably put in contractortransitionstrategy.com. It's not exiting. It's basically creating a plan for the future.
Terrific. David, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time, sharing your sage advice with my audience today. And I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Thanks for the invite, Mark. I appreciate it.
That was David Lupberger, the founder of Contractor Exit Strategy. And this segment was brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done and published to educate consumers, grow their practices and businesses, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.